Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to 8 household animals that ate their owners. Now, this is every pet owner's worst nightmare. I mean, you get a pet, you treat it like part of the family, you feed it all of that stuff, and one day you wake up and it's got its jaws around your leg. Like, absolutely horrific. I can't imagine a dog would do this. Like, surely not. Like, dogs are super affectionate and stuff. Maybe like a snake, a pet snake or something. I can't really think of any other animal that would do this. Like, unless you're like the Tiger King and you've got like 10 tigers in your spare room. But yeah, this should be quite an interesting one to watch and react to. So let's do it.
Here are 8 household animals who ate their owners. These barbaric beasts will make you think twice about getting yourself a pet. Today's video was done in collaboration with Down the Rabbit Hole. More on that later.
That made me jump a bit.
Number 8. The flesh-eating lizards.
What?
When Ron Huff didn't show up for work, one of his relatives became very worried and called the police to his apartment in Newark, Delaware. Mr. Huff was the owner of several flesh-eating Nile lizards, which he would reportedly allow to roam freely around his house. The largest of them measured around 6 feet and weighed 25 pounds. In the wild, Nile monitor lizards can eat birds, eggs, and other animals, and in captivity, they're usually fed raw chicken and liver. Ownership of these animals, which are considered exotic pets in Delaware, requires a permit specifically from the Department of Agriculture. It remained unclear, however, whether Mr. Huff did have exotic pet permits for all of these lizards. When the police arrived at his apartment, they found the reptiles feasting on their owner's decaying corpse.
Oh my god. Ugh.
Armed with small and very sharp teeth and muscular whip-like tails, these animals have the ability to cause serious damage to a person. A team from the Delaware Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals recovered 7 reptiles from Mr. Huff's apartment. The SPCA's intentions were to place them with the educational groups or into zoos. A subsequent medical report was unable to determine the root cause behind Ron Huff's death. An attack by his beloved lizards was not overruled.
I mean, maybe because I'm not a reptile person, but why would you want multiple flesh-eating lizards? Like, is it how they look, the aesthetic? Because, I don't know, having so many of those and you live alone seems a bit of a safety hazard.
Number 7. James Little. The emergency services were called to 61-year-old James Little's Oregon house in March of 2011. This was after a report by the man that his dog had consumed part of his body. According to animal experts, dogs have an instinctual tendency to remove diseased flesh. In accordance with its instinctual behavior, Mr. Little's dog ate 3 of his toes while he slept. The man did suffer from diabetes, and a common symptom of the disease is numbness in the hands or the feet. This was seen as the primary reason why it...
So he didn't know? Oh my god, imagine looking down at your foot and it looks like that because you've only got 2 toes left.
Wake up and screams as a Shiba Inu was eating his flesh. Animal control officers took away the dog and concluded that it didn't pose any threat. And despite losing 3 toes, Mr. Little recovered and decided to put his dog up for adoption. Number 6. Carrie Waldo. 27-year-old Carrie Waldo from Jackson County, Kansas, pled guilty to second-degree child endangerment after the family's pet ferret attacked her infant son. On the 10th of January 2010, the police were called to the residence of Ryan and Carrie Waldo, where they found a 4-month-old covered in blood.
Oh my god.
The couple told the investigators that they were asleep in the house at the time of the attack and that the ferret had never bitten anyone in the past. After using GPS tracking technology and acquiring cell phone records, the investigators later discovered that the couple had been texting from 2 different locations at the time of the attack. It was also revealed that the ferret had bitten the infant twice in the past, and that the Waldo family was trying to get rid of it and had previously contacted a ferret rescue organization. After seeing his son in a pool of blood, Mr. Waldo threw the ferret into a dishwasher, killing it instantly. The infant was taken to a local hospital in...
But dude, didn't they do any research into like what ferrets are like behavior-wise? Because, I mean, why would you have a ferret around a young child?
Critical condition, with only 2 thumbs and a partial pinky still attached to his hands.
That's so
7
sad.
of the infant's fingers had to be amputated because they'd been chewed down all the way to the knuckles. The presence of human blood was also discovered inside of the ferret's stomach. As part of the sentence, Mrs. Waldo was given 2 years of probation in order to attend a 30-day drug recovery program. Mr. Waldo, who also pleaded guilty to second-degree child endangerment, was ordered to serve 40 hours of community service. Both were
Is that it? Is that it?
denied contact with their children while carrying out their sentences. Number 5.
Seems
Janet
lenient.
Veal. On the 4th of April in 2013, the decomposing body of 56-year-old Janet Veal was discovered on the kitchen floor of her Ringwood house in Hampshire, England. Mrs. Veal was estranged from her husband, lived alone, and was described as a bit of a recluse. The woman's neighbors had alerted the police after noticing that she'd been absent for a very extended period of time and that her letterbox was literally overflowing.
Never a good
Police
sign.
investigated, using a ladder to enter the semi-detached property through an unsecured upstairs window. What they discovered inside the house was described as a distressing scene. In the kitchen and the living room, they found the rotting carcasses of a cat and a dog. A thick layer of trash covered the floor, and the house had not been aired for weeks.
So the smell in there must have been rancid. Rancid.
Possibly months. Several of Janet Veal's pets had already died of starvation when they arrived, but the few that had survived did so by eating parts of her dead body.
My
She was
God.
gnawed and eaten by her cats, which had not been fed in weeks. A post-mortem medical report concluded that the woman had died of natural causes, possibly related to a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Number 4.
Tragic.
Harry and Sally.
How long does it take if you stop feeding your pets? How long would it take them to start eating you? I would imagine a long ass time, like a few weeks or something. I know it's kind of a morbid question, but I don't know, like based on that story, I'm just kind of interested.
After their 51-year-old owner tragically committed suicide by shooting himself in the face, 2 pugs named Harry and Sally were forced to eat his remains so that they wouldn't starve to death. They survived by consuming pieces of his brain, his face, and his torso. They were discovered by police in Papillon, a suburb of Omaha, Nebraska, in December of 2009, found several weeks after the time of death that the investigators had determined for their owner. Even though no trace of blood or human tissue was found in the digestive system of either dog, it was the only possible conclusion that the police would arrive to in order to account for the missing body parts in the cadaver. Harry and Sally were taken by the authorities.
Oh, look at those pugs, man. They are very cute, aren't they?
Who wanted to assess the physical and the psychological impact that this ordeal had had on them. After an extended examination, it was concluded that they were in perfect health and that their temperaments were normal. They were deemed eligible for adoption and soon found a new, loving family. Number 3. Sandra Piovesan. In July of 2006, the body of 50-year-old Sandra Piovesan was discovered inside a 50-foot by 150-foot enclosure in her backyard where she kept 9 wolf dog hybrid canines.
Come on. Wolves? I mean, wolves are like not meant to be pets. Like, they're meant to, aren't they quite solitary kind of hunters? Dude, this is alarm bells.
Mrs. Piovesan's daughter became worried after her mother hadn't shown up for a meeting they'd planned for the morning of the incident. She talked to her father, who then went to the house where Mrs. Piovesan lived alone in order to check up on her. He discovered her partially eaten body inside of the enclosure. When animal control and state police arrived on the site, they euthanized the animals by shooting them with darts containing a deadly serum. After the autopsy, the investigation concluded that the woman had sustained multiple soft tissue wounds and that her death had been caused by the wolf dog attack. An animal expert claimed that wolves normally run away from humans out of fear, and that breeding them with domestic dogs eliminates this fear, which can make them even more dangerous. The canines reportedly weighed 70 to 100 pounds, and some of them were 7, even 8 years.
70 to 100 pounds each. She wouldn't have stood a chance, man. 9 of them, like dealing with 9 wolves that weigh 100 pounds each, forget it.
Old. The animals were reportedly healthy prior to the incident, and Miss Piovesan had raised them since they were pups and saw them as her own children. She fed them beef, roadkill, or any scraps of meat that she could find. Miss Piovesan had received several complaints from her neighbors in the past, but they were mostly concerned just with the noise and the canines howling. One possible reason for the attack was that the animals were confined to a plot of land that was just too small for them. A pack that size would normally require 50 to 100 square miles in order to roam. Another possibility was that the animals were particularly agitated as the attack had occurred during their mating season.
Oh dear.
Number 2. Andre Lum.
So those wolves, like in their mating season, they're in heat, right? So are the sexual energy is a bit like heightened, and does that affects everything else? Does it makes them more aggressive?
Lumbosa. In August of 2011, Andre Lumbosa went on a 2-week holiday at the end of the Ramadan religious festival, leaving his dogs behind without any access to water or food. Within just the first couple days, 2 of the weaker, smaller dogs were eaten by the larger ones. On the 31st of August, Mr. Lumbosa returned home.
This guy's an asshole. How could you do that? Why would you do that?
After leaving
Get a dog sitter.
Leaving his luggage by the front door, he entered the house to greet his pets. Hunger, however, had changed the dogs he once knew into feral, ravenous carnivores that lunged at the first piece of meat to walk inside the house in almost 2 weeks. They tore the man apart, reportedly decapitating him and layering the house with blood and pieces of his body. A neighborhood guard was passing the house a few days later and happened to notice the luggage that Mr. Lumbosa had left on his front steps. As the guard approached the house, he felt a strange smell coming from inside and alerted the authorities. Before the police could even enter the residence, they had to neutralize the dogs. The gruesome scene they discovered once inside led them to the conclusion that the man had been butchered by his 7 canines.
So he was the architect of his own demise. Like, if only he did the responsible thing, he would still be alive. What a tragedy.
Number 1. Gypsy the Python. In July of 2009, an albino Burmese python attacked and killed a 2-year-old girl in Oxford, Florida. The toddler was discovered in her cot with the python coiled around her lifeless body and its fangs sunk into her forehead. It was preparing to swallow her whole. The girl's mother, 21-year-old Jaren Hare, and her boyfriend, 34-year-old Charles
They better have got some prison time.
Darnell, were convicted of 3rd-degree manslaughter along with child neglect and sentenced to 12 years in prison. The python, named Gypsy, had been a member of the household for over 5 years in the months leading up to the incident.
I have to say, the color, like, the pattern is beautiful, isn't it? It is.
The serpent, measuring approximately 8 feet and 2 inches, had been starved as the family could no longer afford to feed it. Its last meal had consisted of a squirrel it found on the side of the road. When it was recovered, Gypsy only weighed a life-threatening 13 pounds as opposed to their normal weight of 120 pounds. The tank in which it was kept was improperly secured with a duvet thrown over the top, tethered tied loosely with bungee cords and safety pins, it had already escaped a number of times prior to attacking 2-year-old Cheyenne, but still, the family made no improvements on its enclosure and continued to ignore feeding it properly. When Mr. Darnell saw the serpent coiled around his toddler, he stabbed it several times with a 6-inch knife and meat cleaver in a desperate attempt to save his girl. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Researchers theorize that both—
And that was horrible. I just, a lot of these seem to be self-inflicted almost. Just poor management, you know, poor care for the animals, you know, poorly securing the animals, choosing poorly. Like a wolf, breeding a wolf and a dog. I'm not a dog expert, but even I know that's probably not a good idea. You know, having a ferret in the house when you've got a baby, just crazy irresponsibility, but still sad to hear, you know, how these people were, you know, how they were eaten. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.